Alright, we're on to chapter 3.2, and we are looking at the next step to working towards finding out angles in a triangle. So in this section, we're going to be making your sine, cos, and tan fractions. So what are sine, cos, tan fractions, and where do I find them? So the easiest explanation is that these fractions will help us find out how many degrees an angle is. So as I mentioned in my previous video, if I have a triangle and I've got a little line here to talk about this angle, I'm not going to use a protractor to find out how many degrees it is. But by the end of this chapter, you will know how to figure it out without using a protractor. Now, the only other piece of advice I'm going to give you at this point is to make sure to print off the formula sheet for this chapter before you go any further. And this is found at the very top of chapter 3 on my RCOA. Alright, so making your fraction. There are 3 steps to this process, and the very first one is to label the sides of your triangle. So you may recall or remember from last video how to label the sides of your triangle. I'm going to start by drawing an arrow through the square, and this side is going to be my hypotenuse. Notice how it says that it's 55. Now the next side I'm going to label is the adjacent, because my angle touches the hypotenuse and the adjacent. And then finally, the last one is my opposite. And notice how the opposite is 51. So that is step 1. I label the triangle. Step 2, I'm going to choose a sine, cos, tan fraction on my formula sheet. So I want you to look on your formula sheet. I have copied one right here. And I want you to look at which sides of the triangle we have numbers for. So you'll notice that we have numbers for the hypotenuse and a number for the opposite. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at our formula sheet and figure out which fraction we're going to use that has opposite and it has hypotenuse. So you can see from the formula sheet that sine A equals opposite over hypotenuse. So that is the one we're going to use. So I'm going to copy out the first part, sine A. Now, when it says opposite, I'm going to write down the number on my triangle. That was the opposite side. So that is 51. And where it says the hypotenuse, I'm going to put 55. And that's all we have to do to making our fraction. Let's try another. So the very first step that we do is label the triangle. So I would like you to pause the video and label your triangle the hypotenuse, adjacent, and opposite. Alright, so I'm going to draw an arrow through the right angle, and that is my hypotenuse. And the other side that my angle touches is the adjacent. And of course the leftover one is my opposite. So that is step 1. Step 2, I'm going to choose a fraction on my formula sheet using these numbers. So I've got the adjacent and I've got the opposite. Then I'll look on my formula sheet and I'll try to find the one with the opposite and the adjacent. So what I want you to do at this point is I want you to pause the video and try to figure out which of the fractions has the opposite and the adjacent. Alright, so if you chose tan A, that's correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my fraction. I'm going to copy out the tan A, and my opposite is on the top of the fraction, so it's going to be 8. And the adjacent is on the bottom, which is 20. And that's all I'm going to do. Alright, now it's your turn. I would like you to complete the very first step on your own. So go ahead and pause the video and label your triangle hypotenuse, adjacent, opposite. Alright, so I'm going to draw an arrow through the right angle, and this is my hypotenuse. Then the other side that this angle touches is my adjacent, and the leftover one is my opposite. Now, I would like you to pause the video and choose which fraction we are going to use. So I want you to circle the two sides with numbers and figure out which fraction we're going to use. Okay. So here, one of the sides is 55, which is my hypotenuse, and one of the sides is 34, which is my opposite. So I have to look on my formula sheet for the opposite and the hypotenuse, which is right there. I'll copy out my first part, sine A, and my opposite is 34, and my hypotenuse is 55. And we're done. Let's try another one. Alright, so for this one, I would like you to figure it out all by yourself, except I don't want the angle right there. We're going to mix it up, and I'm going to have the angle right here. So I would like you to go ahead and complete step 1, step 2, and step 3 to make your fraction. Go ahead. Alright, so if I label my triangle, I'm going to draw an arrow to the hypotenuse. Now here was a bit of a trick because the other side that this angle touches is over here now, which is my adjacent. And the last one is my opposite. Then I'm going to circle the two sides with numbers. And I have my opposite and my hypotenuse, which is right there. I copy out the first part on the left, and my opposite is 52, and my hypotenuse is 56. Alright, so I'd like you to complete Chapter 3.2 homework and a piece of special information. 2 questions on the chapter quiz will be similar to the homework questions.